So over the break, I've slightly softened some of the transitions just because at the moment none of them are the definitive article, so I'm still building up that underlayer. So at the moment I'm not that worried, if I'm losing a bit of information. Now obviously coming back from a break, first thing we do as always is go back, re-establish our shadow shapes with nice solid light and dark. A little bit this way. Okay, perfect. So using a slightly smaller brush as we're getting into parts where we can get a little bit more detail now. Now that we've started to get the shapes a little bit more accurately, we can start to sort of characterize those shadow shapes a touch more. And in the same way that, when getting smaller brushes in to focus on getting those dark shapes a little bit more accurate, we also realize it is a game of push and pull, and so we're going to need to get a little bit more specific with some of the light shapes. So it will be basically sort of chiseling in from both sides at certain points. And whilst I'm doing that, I'm also making decisions about tone. So for example, when working on this section, I know that at the moment I've probably gone very slightly too light here in relation to the whole portrait. So whilst correcting, I need to correct with a slightly darker tone. Now, there's a very subtle highlight on this cheekbone here, which is going to be very important to put in, but also you've got to realise that it's going to still be a lot darker than what we probably first think. Just because it's surrounded by darker tones, it registers in our mind as lighter. So you've got to be careful of not getting caught up with that and making it too light, because what that'll do will pull the whole cheek too far over for our portrait. We also essentially, certainly if like me you're painting alla prima and you haven't had the advantage of having the underlayer dry, is you're going to be having to use more paint, thicker, more opaque paint as we get further on in the painting. Just otherwise you're going to struggle to get it to actually sit on the canvas. So even for those slightly smaller, more intricate parts, still try and break it up using straights. When you're painting stuff like cheekbones, remember one will always correlate with the one on the other side of the head, so make sure that they're working together. So often you see these portraits where cheekbones don't match up and it totally throws off the whole structure of the head. So it's at this point in the painting where not only are we starting to get more specific with our shadow shapes, and those key points, but we're also starting to think about how they're turning, whether they've got sharper or softer edges. And that's where we're going to start to really characterize. So at this point we should have essentially the grounding of the likeness there, but to really start to sort of push that and characterize the features, we need to start thinking not only about the intricacies of those shapes, but how they bleed off into the lights. So with the dry brush here, I'm just pushing the paint, which I've already got on the canvas, around a little bit, just to push it into the position I prefer it to be in. Manipulating what I've already got down rather than necessarily putting more information down in parts. Obviously, what can happen when you do this is you lose too much information, you lose too much of the shapes. So always be careful when softening on the canvas that you don't totally lose all the hard work you've put down. Stuff like the nostril, keep it a little bit softer than what you sort of initially would think, because it's a sort of inward turn. It's much softer than what you might think. So try and keep that edge nice and soft, which will just help with that inward turn. So with a really small brush, just trying to make sure these edges are soft enough. You know, the nose, the brow, the mouth, there's so many little shifts of soft and sharp that you can really spend time honing in on those little bits of variation. And so much of working with an edge, if you're trying to soften it, is often you over soften it and you lose that edge. So you've then got to go back and find it. But don't worry too much about, you know, going through that stage. Don't be afraid to sort of find it and lose it and find it and lose it. So again, keep going back and forth until you find those shapes which you're really happy with. There are always going to be parts, certainly after a break, where you start to see mistakes. You can see where you can edit. Because over time, the more you look at something, certainly in an elongated amount, in an elongated amount of sort of a time over sitting, the more your mind starts to sort of auto-correct what you're seeing. So you start to become blind to your mistakes. And that's where something like a mirror is really helpful. And you can just, if you don't have a mirror, you can use a phone, which most people do have in their pocket. And you can use that as a black mirror. So for example, from where you were standing, if you were to take your phone, have it on a lock screen, put that up to your nose, stand about 45 degrees to where, so 90 degrees from where you were. You're looking anyway, so you can look at both your image and the model. What it does is it tricks your eye into believing that it's seeing the image for the first time again, or see it afresh. You start to once again become slightly more aware of what you're looking at.